Hello, everybody. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, hello.
We're here for our monthly live stream on the history of fresh produce.
Super
Hope everyone had
excited.
a nice Thanksgiving.
I did. Did you?
Yeah, that I can remember. A lot of sweet potatoes. A lot of sweet potatoes. It's my
All right.
favorite dish: sweet potatoes with marshmallows.
Ooh, all right. All right. Good classic. Good classic. Good classic.
Yeah, how about you? Got any good
Uh,
classics?
I always say my favorite is the green bean casserole, if done right. And then my mother-in-law makes a pumpkin and banana bread too, which is always amazing.
Pumpkin and banana bread. What,
Both,
together
yeah.
in one bread?
No, they
Oh,
two breads. I like that.
two breads.
Two
I was gonna say,
breads.
I've never had that one before.
Two
That's
breads, but two loaves.
two
But
loaves.
yeah, two different styles.
Nice, nice. Well, we hope everybody had again a nice Thanksgiving. We're here for your post Thanksgiving recovery, where
Yeah.
it's gonna be I don't know. We've done somewhat of a theme like this before in the past, where we've talked about movies back early days. I think it was one of our very first live stream with Disney and
That's
produce
right.
of Disney movies, right?
That was a good one. That
It
was a good
was.
one.
I did like that one.
We had a lot of people react to that one.
So we'll see how you all our listeners enjoy this one today. But before we get into what it is specifically, even though you probably are gathering it from the title, if you're live or listening via the podcast,
Please.
so what would our listeners have heard? We did the history of we just did the Mafia last week or this past week.
That was a good one.
Artichoke King, right?
Mhm.
So Mafia back. We always like the Mafia back. We'll see if we can throw out another Mafia in for
I think we
next
should.
year. Right? We'll have to find another Mafia story.
We have to. It just goes great with produce.
It does. That's just a natural fit. And then we had the Guano Wars. The Guano Wars. Lots of bird poop.
Guano.
That was fun.
I enjoyed
Always
that
good
one.
for some good wars and unexpected.
It's good to know what bird poop does for, everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And what we got upcoming. So we got history of figs.
Yep.
We have in honor for the seasonal holiday, the three wise men. We're going to kind of explore that story a little bit. I think most of our listeners probably have heard of, even if you don't celebrate Christmas. I think that's
Everybody's heard of the three wise men.
three wise men.
And if you
three
don't want to enjoy the three wise men, go back to last year and learn about chestnuts.
Yeah.
Go back.
If you want to pass this one, you can go to chestnuts from
Go to chestnuts last year, and we'll see. Do some research on the three wise men.
Exactly. And then I think we round off the year. We'll have one more live stream where we're going to kind of do. I think the idea is going to be, what is 2025 going to be remembered for in history related to produce? Because we're kind of mid decade here, so we figure we just do a little review of what we think might be remembered. Highlights. And then we'll round off with a Swiss fruit tree murderer. So stay tuned for that one to round off the year. And then we're into the new year.
Bum, bum, bum.
And we'll have some exciting, I think we're going to launch next year with a new series, multi-part series on Joseph Banks.
We've had some great multi-part series this year. I'm just saying, not to be biased.
I enjoy the multi-part series because we really can dive into the deep.
We don't have to rush through it because we've got other stuff to do for the day.
Sometimes it's a little hairy when we're kind of rushing through these stories.
I agree.
But that's going to be good. So, we're doing today space movies because obviously a few episodes back we had a real life NASA food scientist on our show, and we just couldn't get enough space. I know you couldn't get enough space.
I couldn't. No, I couldn't. And she was here in Florida at the Kennedy Space Center as a guest speaker. No, I actually was in California that weekend.
Oh darn!
But she was over at the Kennedy Space Center in kind of like a luncheon that they were having. So pretty cool.
Yeah. So we're gonna keep with that theme in this live stream, and we're gonna be exploring space movies and some of the produce ties in those movies. And I think it'll be a fun one. Just some of our favorite movies, some that I've only recently watched. I know Patrick has a few that he's always been talking about since we started this podcast show. So yeah, I mean, look, I think as it turns out, Patrick, when humanity imagines these far-flung futures, Mars bases, derelict star freighters, lost astronauts clinging to life. We always come back to that same ancient earthly truth, right? No crops, no civilization. We've seen it time and time again on this show.
100%.
And even in the distant vacuum of space, we simply cannot escape produce. And we saw that with Vicky.
It's absolutely just really a remarkable thing, isn't it, John?
Yeah.
Because in all these grand visions of the future with AI and warp drives and dust storms like the size of continents, right? That you're thinking about these things that happen, right?
Yeah.
The hero turns out to be a spud, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
And obviously I know where your mind's at, and I can see it here in the notes where you're going to be going with this. So that's, I guess, why Spuds is on your mind. And that's obviously one of your favorite movies, right? The Martian.
that was a good one.
Right? It's a story about, for those that don't know it, haven't seen it yet, it's basically a story about isolation, survival, and really scientific ingenuity. And of course, tubers, many tubers at that. But it's not just a potato-based comedy film, okay? For as much as we like to tease about it, but there there are actually fascinating historical presidents behind this story within the movie. So presidents stretching back through the age of exploration across the Andes and into the heart of early modern Europe.
Yeah, and we've talked about these things in earlier episodes too. But yes, I do love this movie. It's a good one. For anyone who hasn't watched it recently, I mean, the premise is simple. Okay, astronaut and botanist Mark Watney, played by Matt Damon. He finds himself stranded on Mars, right,
Yep.
with almost nothing but his brain, his training, and crucially, 12 potatoes.
There they are.
Okay. 12. Okay. Sent with the crew for a Thanksgiving meal. And
Well, there you
in the
go.
right,
Thanksgiving.
right. And in the bleak red desert of Mars, though, Thanksgiving suddenly becomes the difference between life and death now. Okay. So Watney uses those 12 potatoes to grow more potatoes. And those combined with vitamin pills and ration packs, this is what kept him alive for those, I would say, 549 souls, roughly about a year and a half now,
Mm.
John, if you compute. Now, this sounds absurd, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like something out of a like Crusoe on Mars children's book. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. But although, to be fair, though, if anyone could survive with just potatoes, it would be Matt Damon. I mean, come on.
I was gonna say it could be Matt Damon, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, but actually, there's good science behind the scenario. Good enough that when the novel came out, NASA engineers said it was, on the whole, surprisingly plausible. Okay, I mean, potatoes are they're excellent survival crops, calorie dense, nutrient rich, and famously tolerant of awful soil. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As we've seen in some of our earlier episodes, they revolutionized European diets when they arrived from the Andes in the 16th century, right? Some historians even credit them with giving Europe the caloric punch required to conquer vast parts of the globe. So, in many ways, Watney is not doing anything new here, right, John?
No.
He is tapping into an old frontier tradition. Explorers turning to hardy, starchy crops to stay alive in unforgiving landscapes. Okay. Now, the science in the film is not perfect, of course. Come on. In reality, random potatoes are unlikely to take to Martian soil. Okay. Soil that we now know contains toxin perchlorates, discovered after Andy Weir had finished the book. They need rinsing and soaking before even being safe, John. So Watney probably couldn't have grown enough calories to sustain the extremely physical labor that he's performing in the movie. Okay. Now you're not, again, that's just getting down technical too. Now, in fact, modern day potato only diet experiments, and yes, you're wondering, these do exist, show dramatic weight loss. So in one study back in 2010, the then head of Washington State's Potato Commission, Chris Voigt, lost 21 pounds in 60 days.
Wow.
He actually did this to protest anti-potato federal proposals. And then there's the Australian Andrew Taylor, who lost 115 pounds in 1 year, John.
Wow. You know
So
what? The guest we did have, again, Vicky, on our space episode, she did mention this. You remember that surviving on just potatoes wasn't going to work? She
she
kind
said
of
it
crossed
really
our
wouldn't
hearts.
work. She said there was a couple things you wouldn't want in
Yeah,
space. Remember?
yeah. And I remember she's like very specifically like potatoes would not work.
It wouldn't,
Oh,
and she was exactly right. No,
yeah, of course.
but in combination with supplements, and for a limited period, it's not implausible.
Right.
Watney's methods, cutting and curing the starter potatoes, creating proper rows, even using dried freeze-killed human waste as fertilizer, all are scientifically credible. They are. Experiments on Earth using Mars soil simulants have shown plants can grow surprisingly well, provided they get a bit of nitrogen and decent light. So it's worth remembering, even the sunlight issues of Mars, right? Because remember, Mars is further away from the sun than Earth. And so
Mhm.
apparently sunlight is about 44% weaker than on Earth. So this can be countered with grow lights that Watney had those because he was conducting botanical experiments even before being stranded.
Mhm.
NASA really does plan this sort of thing. We learned that from Vicky, remember?
Yeah, yeah.
But the historical echo here is the fascinating part. The potato as a frontier crop. When it left the Andes and traveled across the world, it became a weapon of survival for sailors crossing oceans, settlers in hostile environments, right?
Yeah,
And communities facing famine. And it grew in rocky soils with little water and could be stored for months. It helped fuel European expansion, military campaigns, and countless colonial ventures. In The Martian, that tradition simply moves to the next frontier, which is space. The potato becomes a symbol of human resilience, a starchy flag planted on a barren world.
yeah. And actually, it also makes the excellent point that colonization, whether of the Americas or Mars, really begins not when you plant a flag, but when you plant a crop, right?
True.
That's
So
that's a
true.
permanent thing.
And actually, Mark Watney himself says once you grow crops somewhere,
Mm.
you've officially colonized it.
Oh, there you go.
And speaking of colonizing space with crops, the idea didn't begin with the Martian at all. Science fiction, right, has been wrestling with botanical survival for decades, often with surprisingly emotional results. Which brings us to the next film, one of the earliest, most haunting portrayals of space based ag, a film filled with forests adrift in the cosmos, ecodomes, and drones.
That's right. That's, of course, Silent Running. And this is basically a film that proves that, if nothing else, that even in space, gardeners have it tough, right? We all know how tough it is for our growers in this industry. So, anyway, this is a 1970s film. So, I'm not sure how many of our listeners will have heard it or seen it. I personally just watched it recently after kind of doing some research. And it's basically a film that practically smells of shag carpet and existential dread. Okay. But beneath the retro veneer of this styled movie lies something astonishing, a story about a man alone in space fighting to preserve cantaloupes. And that's right. I should say cantaloupes because Earth's last remaining specimens of fruit, vegetables, forests, and wildlife all tucked away inside these enormous geodesic domes floating beyond Saturn. It's basically Noah's Ark via Buckminster Fuller, which for
Wow.
those that don't know who Buckminster Fuller is, he's an American architect famous for his lattice shell structure. So if you've been to Montreal, you'll have seen this structure. Anyway, and so on aboard the Valley Forge, which is the
Hmm.
name of the ship that he's on, sits our hero, and that is Freeman Lowell, who is a botanist, ecologist, and patron saint of doomed idealists, I would say. So while his crewmates
Okay.
are zooming about on motorized scooters on the ship, our main character is dedicating himself to tending the dome's ecosystems as if they were these sacred relics. Because in this future, in this movie, they are.
Hmm. No, even Noah didn't have to contend with the low morale of American Airlines intersolar cargo division.
No. And yeah, it is a very bizarre product placement that they
Yeah,
have
it is.
American Airlines like slapped onto the ship. It's I don't know. Again, I wasn't in the 1970s, so maybe that's makes sense. But for me, I was kind of lost with that one.
That made no sense.
But the twist though comes when Earth declares this this preservation project unnecessary and orders that the domes be destroyed. And Lowell, horrified, of course, rebels, choosing the side of nature over duty. And in the process, the plants become more than just props. They are symbols of humanity's severed relationship with the natural world. And for all of its 1970s special effects, Silent Running was startlingly prophetic about the emotional weight we place on green life in hostile places, right? Because here's the thing, NASA is now doing the very research the film imagined. So things like hydroponics, closed loop life support agriculture, experiments like veggie and the advanced plant habitat growing lettuce, radishes, peppers, all the things we talked about uh, on the International Space Station. Okay, so not ecosystems, of course, on the scale of the Valley Forge's domes, mind you. For that, you'd need vast energy inputs and radiation shielding thick enough to stop a small star. But the principle that fresh produce is sanity preserving, is life giving, and symbolically vital far from home has turned out to be absolutely right. And that's, again, not new because historically humans have always brought plants with them on long voyages, right? So during the 18th and 19th centuries, ship captains cultivated these little gardens on board. So they have potted herbs, greens, anything to ward off the specter of scurvy. We've seen scurvy time and time again on the show. And
Oh,
Captain Cook,
yeah.
for example, he insisted on greens as if they were more precious than gold bullion. And sailors might mutiny over flogging, but fresh cabbage, that was worth its weight in rubies. That kept you alive, right?
I mean, hold on, John. I mean, you're saying Silent Running is less about the future, more about the Royal Navy?
Well, in part, yeah, because
Okay.
because
All
you know
right.
what? At its core, the film taps into a very old tradition, and that is
True.
people risking everything to preserve plants. And there's really two examples that come straight to mind for me when I saw this movie. So first, we talked about this on the show. We did this on an episode a while back. The botanists of the Vavilov Institute during the siege of Leningrad. So there they sat, right, surrounded by thousands of edible seeds and tubers, the world's most precious crop collection, while the city was being starved. And they refused to eat a single kernel. And as such, they ended up freezing. They starved, eventually died, but they protected those seeds because they believed in a future generation that might need them. And so it's one of the most extraordinary acts of scientific devotion in history. And the echoes with Lowell tending his forested domes in this movie, tending them lovingly, obsessively, are just unmistakable. I mean, the idea that preserving biodiversity is worth any sacrifice, even life. And then, as for the second example, and this is perhaps the most silent running esque story of all, is Captain William Bligh in The Voyage of the Bounty. Now, we're going to be talking about this a little more, I think, actually, in our first series of 2026. But for the sake of this example, so everyone remembers probably the mutiny, this coconut theft, the tropical romance, the Fletcher Christian of it all. But few recall that the Bounty was essentially a floating greenhouse, and its mission was to transport breadfruit trees from Tahiti to feed enslaved laborers in the Caribbean. It was a humanitarian economic experiment in botany. And the ship was tiny, 215 tons. And yet, Bligh and the botanist David Nelson crammed it with more than 1,000 live breadfruit trees. So, skylights, gratings, water recycling systems. It was all a horticultural spaceship, basically, before spaceships existed. And like in the movie Silent Running, the plants caused tension, right? Because they took up water, they took up space, they represented a mission some sailors resented. Most people are not going to be caring about a bunch of plants on a months or years long voyage. And so during the mutiny, the plants, and for Bligh, his most precious specimens, they ended up getting tossed overboard into the sea. But still, he clung to his botanical notes, his charts, his research, even as he navigated a 3,600-mile open boat journey. And Nelson, heroic in his own right, died shortly after reaching Timor. But their devotion to preserving the knowledge, to preserving future crops, resonates perfectly with this film's themes. So silent running isn't just ecological sci-fi. It is part of a real historical lineage of people who risked, sometimes lost, their lives for plants, for seeds, for the future. And the domes aren't just fantasy; they're metaphors for all the floating greenhouses, all the beleaguered seed vaults, all the plant collections humans have guarded across oceans and deserts and wars. But Patrick, that silent running, which again, if you haven't seen it, I think you can catch on a lot of streaming things these days. So definitely recommend to watch. But let's talk about something else, Patrick. And this is going to be another one of your favorite movies that you've talked about a lot. You convinced me to watch it earlier this year, maybe last year.
You actually watched it? Okay,
I did. I remember telling you I watched it.
just checking.
You were begging me to watch this, but I did.
It was good.
It was, and that is, of course, Interstellar.
Yeah, this one was definitely one of my favorites for sure. And honestly, the movie you just talked about could have been a post story of Interstellar. Seriously,
Yeah.
because this movie is all about a civilization discovering that its soil is finished, right? And not in the romantic, kind of ash to ashes sense, right? It's more of like finished in there will be no lunch tomorrow, like there's nothing more that can grow or ever sense, right?
Yeah.
Because in Interstellar, humanity is dying of corn fatigue, actually, essentially. The bite, essentially a plague, has chewed through crop after crop until okra, right? Okra, that most invincible vegetable, has finally succumbed, leaving only the monoculture to end all monocultures, corn.
Yeah, it's like the world's saddest farm shop, just corn products.
Just corn. It's like shopping at
kind
the
of like
Kohl's
America,
store.
right?
Yeah.
Everything you need is corn based.
Exactly. And now that's what sets the stakes. So the movie opens with Joseph Cooper, played by Matthew McConaughey, former NASA pilot turned farmer, because in this world, everyone is, by necessity, a farmer. The global economy is basically corn and occasionally baseball.
Yeah.
Dust storms sweep across the plains. People are coughing up dirt, and the very air is thinning as the blight consumes the plants that keeps oxygen flowing, right?
Yeah.
It's not quite the apocalypse, but it's the dress rehearsal for it. Like, seriously. Now, what's brilliant is that the film makes the loss of produce, the collapse of the entire agricultural foundation of humanity, the real antagonist.
Yeah.
It's not the black hole, the wormhole, or even Matthew McConaughey. It's the fundamental fragility of the environment that feeds us, right?
Yeah.
Now, this might all seem very futuristic, very speculative, but it actually has a surprising historical echo to it, right? One that takes us into outer space, but to Greenland, sometimes around the 13th century, okay?
So the original icy frontier.
Yeah. I mean, you're exactly. Because what happened to the Norse settlers in Greenland is, in many ways, Interstellar without the spaceship.
Okay.
Right? The Norse arrived in the late 10th century following Eric the Red, a man whose talent for killing neighbors was apparently matched only by his talent for marketing. Okay. Greenland, he calls it, in the sort of real estate spin that would make a modern developer blush, and people buy it, right? They come over in long ships, settle farms, build communities, and for centuries cling on in one of the harshest environments in the North Atlantic. But as Interstellar, the climate begins to change, subtly at first, then brutally. The onset of the little ice age brings colder, dried summers. Growing seasons shorten, hay yields collapse, cows have to be overwintered, indoors, which means more stored feed, right? Which means even less land for anything else, okay? Their entire model of farming, so central to their identity, begins to fail. And so, just as Cooper's world becomes a monoculture of corn, the Greenlanders' diet narrows. They shift from terrestrial animals to marine ones, and those isotopes in their bones tell the story. Fewer cows, more seals, fewer feasts, more subsistence, right? The hunt farther in rougher seas with rising risk. Now ships are lost, men die, and the margin for survival shrink to almost nothing. Okay, but and this is important, they don't just throw their hands up like the crew of the Endurance. They adapt. They reorganize their society for communal seal hunting. They shift livestock strategies. They rework the rhythms of life. They hold on for centuries after the cooling begins. Climate doesn't destroy them outright. It simply pushes them to the point where you have to adapt and adapt enough, right? So now, this is the parallel I find so haunting, okay? Both Interstellar and the story of Norse Greenland show what happens when the environment, the system of that environmental system underpinning your food supply shifts faster than your ability to adjust.
Yeah.
You can have courage, ingenuity, tradition, even communal solidarity, and still find yourself living quite suddenly in a world where your crops no longer grow, your livestock no longer thrives, and your children no longer have a future in the place that you've called home.
And at that point, you either build a spaceship or you don't.
Exactly. And the Norse didn't have a wormhole conveniently parked near Saturn.
Yeah, they have
Okay.
Valhalla.
I was going to say, that was the twist, the science fiction versus fiction. What they had was dwindling pasture land and increasingly unfriendly seas. And eventually, slowly, their settlements flickered out, which brings us back to Interstellar, because the emotional heart of the film is not about physics at all. It's about the pain of leaving a dying home, about trying to decide when staying and fighting becomes staying and starving. And of course, in cinematic fashion, right, the solution, a colossal arc ship full of frozen embryos, essentially a mobile seed vault with thrusters.
Yeah.
And that idea, the ship is as a floating Eden, a place where ag and civilization are preserved in transit, brings us nearly to another space film. And this one is actually based on a very similar premise of Interstellar. Am I right, John?
Yeah. And that movie is, of course, Passengers, right? With Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence. That's
Right.
more recent film in the last 10 years or so.
Right. And so our main characters are on board. The Avalon. I love this movie, by the way. A gleaming corporate, hyper-engineered ark carrying 5,000 colonists to a new Eden, Homestead 2. And because this is very on brand for the types of films we're discussing today, it's doing so far very for a familiar reason. Earth has collapsed under its own environmental failures, right? Ecocide, biosphere breakdown, the usual apocalyptic cocktail, right, John?
I think we should be taking cues from these movies. They all seem to be saying the same thing. Anyway.
Well, basically, if you can't grow a carrot on Earth anymore, you pack up and try your luck somewhere else.
Yeah, sort of Interstellar U-Haul with better lighting.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So now what Passengers does, interestingly, is if sometimes unintentionally, right, is borrow from very old human stories about leaving home, transporting the essential of life, and trying desperately not to kill those essentials along the way. Because the Avalon isn't just transporting people, it's transporting nature.
Yeah.
It has hydroponic gardens on board, beautiful, gleaming, stale rows of vegetables and fruit, the kind that only ever appear in sci-fi films or in grocery marketing campaigns.
Yeah, never in our fridges, right?
Never. Never, never, never. Nor in mine, okay? But those hydroponic gardens aren't just there for show. They're a continuation of something humans have been doing for a millennia, carrying our plants with us where we migrate. Food isn't just sustenance, it's civilization in a basket. And the historical echo Passengers rings most clearly for me was Polynesia.
Of course. Yeah. The original masters, one would say, right? Of long distance space travel, just, I would say, horizontally rather than vertically.
Exactly. The Polynesian voyagers who crossed the Pacific in double-hulled canoes weren't just transporting themselves. They carried an entire portable ecosystem with them, the so-called canoe plants, taro, sweet potato, breadfruit, bananas, sugarcane, gourds, the absolute essentials for rebooting life on a new island. These plants, okay, weren't tossed in willy-nilly. They were carefully wrapped, protected, okay, in earth-filled gourds or woven baskets, kept moist with seawater, rinses, and guarded like treasure. The crews ate taro and sweet potato greens en route, and coconut seedlings were essential naturally canteens, drinkable water inside a living plant. Come on, right?
Can't
If you
beat
think
that.
about it, the Avalon's hydroponic garden is just a bigger, sleeker, flashier version of those baskets filled with taro sprouts. A 21st century canoe plant nursery drifting through space.
Yeah, with slightly fewer chances of being overturned by a rogue wave.
I
Then
mean,
again, you
yeah.
have the whole risk of, space travel thing.
I
So
mean,
maybe
yeah.
that's offset.
I mean, come on. I mean, yeah, just a bit of space travel. What could go wrong?
Yeah, what could go wrong?
But the principle is the same. You take the biological foundations of your world with you, because without them, the new world means nothing. And
Oh,
all of those sits in stark contrast to Jim Preston's, who is Chris Pratt's character, the personal disaster, waking up 90 years too early, alone on a ship meant to keep everyone in perfect slumber while the plants quietly grow in their trays. He's surrounded by life he can't use on a ship heading toward a world he won't live to see. But the film's moral core, Jim reviving Aurora, the question of companionship versus consent, survival versus selfishness, that sits alongside something older still, right?
yeah.
Migration is always a story of loneliness, risk, and the hope that the little bundle of life you're carrying with you, whether it's taro in a gourd or hydroponic tomatoes in a glass tube, will survive long enough to make the journey worthwhile.
Yeah. It's almost pastoral, isn't it? Just except in space and with more Chris Pratt.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want more Chris Pratt, right? In space? Okay. All right. And it
Pratt was
is.
made for space, it seems.
And he does. A kind of cosmic echo, though, right? Of the ancient Pacific. Humans, plants, survival, and the quiet terror of being too far from home to turn back. And that idea that you might be the last caretaker of life itself. It brings us very nearly to the final film you were going to touch on, a film where humanity's survival depends not on a garden inside a ship, but on the sun outside it.
That's right. And based on that, the aptly named film Sunshine. So this is a film that I would say the stakes are nothing less than reigniting the sun itself. Nothing too big, right? Just have to relight the sun. And of course, where everything ultimately hinges on a garden. Because of course it does. If you're going to tell a story about humanity hanging by a thread, you're going to need some plants.
Always.
Yeah.
What I love about this is I would say the poster of this film. And the more movies I've watched, the more I've come to realize too that Hollywood loves a good vegetable crisis. And by looking at this, the poster of this film too, I mean, it clearly shows some dramatic movie here, John.
Yeah, it's a little different tone
Hollywood.
than the Passengers poster we just saw.
Yeah, right?
This one, I don't know, makes me a little bit
A
uncomfortable.
little Jeffrey Dahmer-ish here.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it definitely seems to be that way, like you said about these vegetable crises. Hollywood does seem, at least in these sci-fi movies that we
do.
I mean, there's always a garden involved. It always has to do with agricultural destruction on Earth and all this thing. That all said, we might just be watching too many produce-themed movies.
True.
Yeah, we might be a little distracted by what we know. But anyway, in Sunshine, our vegetable crisis takes place aboard the Icarus II in the year 2057. So not too far from now, Patrick, about 30 some odd years from now. The sun is dying, and as such, Earth is freezing. And humanity, what's their answer? They send 8 astronauts with a giant mirrored stellar bomb to jumpstart the star like a cosmic defibrillator.
Wow.
Now, amid all the high concept physics and chain reaction bomb theory, the part that really grabbed me as a lover of history and produce, and I'm sure of you too, Patrick, is the ship's oxygen garden. So this was kind of a cool little scene in the movie.
Yep.
And it's basically this lush, humid biome tended by Corazon, which is played by Michelle Yeoh. And it isn't just a place where tomatoes or squash are grown for fun, right? They're not doing that for no reason. This is actually the ship's lungs. So it's a natural self-regenerating oxygen source because on long-term mission, you need a living system to keep breathing. Machines can break, but plants, with certain degree can grow. And I think Vicky even mentioned that, like when we go to Mars, we're going to need to have some sort of technology like this to generate oxygen.
Right. And until someone, accidentally points the spaceship at the sun.
Well, yeah, in this movie, that's where the human factor comes in. So, uh, as the Icarus 2 approaches Mercury in the movie, they pick up a distress beacon from the first mission, which was Icarus 1. If you haven't caught on to why they called it Icarus 2, well, now you know.
Now
And
you know.
there's a reason for that. So here we get our first historical echo in the movie, which is the temptation of a shortcut. So physicist Kappa persuades Captain Kaneda to alter their route to intercept Icarus 1 because another payload could allow them another
Yep.
attempt, of course, right? But the detour requires recalculation, lots of it. And so while everyone else sleeps, poor navigator Trey plots the new course but forgets very critically to realign the reflective shields.
And forgetting to realign the shields when you're flying near the sun, I would suspect is pretty bad.
That's probably probably putting it mildly. I'd say it's probably disastrous,
Just saying.
right? I mean, that's not exactly the kind of thing you want to overlook.
Nope.
So the unprotected panels get scorched, and the crew is suddenly fighting for the one resource they absolutely cannot lose, and that is oxygen. So Cassie, the pilot, manages to angle the shields back into shadow, but the damage is already done. And when Kaneda and Kappa make a spacewalk to repair the panels, reflected sunlight actually ends up vaporizing the communication towers and critically the oxygen garden. So
See?
that incinerates it is gone. And the moment that garden burns is one of the most gut wrenching in the film, right? Because Corazon, who has tended these plants like children, is horrified. That
Ugh.
little green room is her world and her purpose, and now it's just complete ash.
It reminds me a bit of the Oregon Trail,
Okay, yeah.
except in space and with higher SPF requirements. Like, you can't just have the SPF shirt, guys. You got to have like the full
No,
on,
you got full cream.
like you got to look,
high-
you got to Clark
You're white.
Griswold yourself totally up, man.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Yeah, it's a
straight
bit like
up.
when we talked about the Llewellyns, right? And how they were
Oh,
protecting
yeah.
those plants with literally everything they had, right?
Yep.
Going through everything. But actually, Patrick, you're not completely far off where I was going because there was one group on the Oregon Trail that mirrors a lot of what we see here in the movie Sunshine, and that is the Donner Party. So we didn't talk about the Donner Party in the Llewellyns because they're kind of not related to the Llewellyn story. But the Donner Party, they also were seduced by a supposed shortcut, like in the movie Sunshine, and that was the Hastings cutoff, and that promised to make their journey faster and easier. And we've heard that story before when we were doing the Llewellyns. I think there was even a shortcut that was offered. I think the Llewellyns ended
Yeah, I
up taking
remember.
it, and it paid off. Or no, did they take it? No, maybe they didn't take it. I can't remember.
You should go back. Hey, listen, if you haven't listened to the Llewellyns,
Yeah, exactly.
go back and
Because
listen.
I think it was some stranger, and they're like, I got a new way to sell you.
I
I
mean,
remember
yeah.
us saying like, "Ooh, do we ever trust a stranger telling us they know a shortcut?" I don't know.
Not in this day and age.
I'm not gonna do that. But in this case, for the Donner Party, they did. But as you can see, if you're watching this live or back replay on YouTube, you can see the trails here. And so the Hastings the cutoff, on a map looks shorter, yes, but in reality, this path actually slowed them down. It chewed up their energy, it killed all their livestock, it drained their stores, and really pushed them fatally late into the Sierra Nevada. And as we all know, if you know about the Oregon Trail, you want to get through those mountains before winter strikes because it becomes a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time they reach the mountains, much like the Icarus 2 reaching Mercury in the movie Sunshine, they were already very, very low on resources and dangerously behind schedule.
And I suppose unlike the crew, right? The Icarus crew, the Donner Party couldn't grow a nice oxygen garden,
No,
right?
no, they couldn't. In this case, I would say their oxygen garden equivalent would be foraging, right?
Yeah.
But they couldn't forage at all because early on, heavy snows trapped them. and their edible plants, as a result, were gone under meters of snow. So their fallback food source, the cattle, mostly lost at this point, they were left gnawing hides, boiling leather, and surviving on scraps. I mean, that's what they had left. So their disaster wasn't sudden, like in the movie Sunshine, like a fire in a greenhouse, but it came from the same root cause, and that was miscalculation, a fatal underestimation of how long the journey would take, how harsh the terrain could be, and how dependent their survival was on a fragile supply chain. And here's a fun, slightly chilling historical twist. So Abraham Lincoln almost joined this party, Patrick.
Really?
Yes. So when James Reed was a businessman who had worked with Lincoln, was planning the trip west, Lincoln was tempted. So this was, keep in mind, this was about 20 or so years before his presidency. So it's not like he was president and said, "Yeah, I want to join the war." Right? This is before any of that happened. But at the time, Lincoln had a toddler and another baby on the way. Not to
Okay.
mention he was just getting started in his political career. So he decided to do the right thing and said, "Nah, I'm gonna skip this trip. I'm gonna stay behind." But just imagine how different American history would have been had he been trapped in the Sierra Nevada in 1846 with nothing but frozen oxen, poor rationing, and Lansford Hastings' terrible directions.
Wow. Sounding like the greatest what if of the American West. President Lincoln failed not by an assassination bullet, but by a questionable shortcut and a lack of edible vegetation.
That's right. Yeah,
Jeez.
it would have been a different story, I think,
A whole different story.
a little bit. But again, both stories, the Sunshine and the Donner Party show how a single decision, a small navigational error, or a seductive promise of an easier path can doom an entire expedition.
Yeah.
And in both cases, the destruction of a food or oxygen source becomes the tipping point. So Carazone's garden goes up in flames, just as the Donner's party food sources disappear under snowdrifts. And when your survival depends on plants, real physical fragile plants, your margin for error is terrifyingly thin. I mean, we know that just from selling produce, right? You can't just sit on
Yeah.
that stuff for weeks,
100%.
months, days. You got to move. Of course, NASA has already recognized this. So their experiments with space gardens and the Biosphere 2 project in the 1990s were all attempts to see whether a fully closed environment could sustain human life for years. Because the lesson from both history and cinema is simple. If you lose your garden, you lose your future.
I agree.
So those are kind of I think all the movies that we kind of grabbed and wanted to talk about today. I'm sure there's probably more,
A lot more, but
right?
the ones we had fun with. I enjoyed these ones.
Yeah. I'm going to have to rewatch them again tonight, Patrick.
I don't know about tonight, but soon.
Nah.
Interstellar's one, like those are, you got to also realize too that some of these movies, they as much as they don't seem like dramas, they really are,
Oh,
and
yeah.
some of them they're very sad, and like even Interstellar, they get you at the end because again, it's
Don't give it
showing,
away now. Or
it's
spoiler alert.
no, it's showing though, like you saying goodbye to your planet, like there's you're
Yeah.
saying goodbye to life, like it's very emotional.
Yeah. No, it is. But when in the end, I won't give away like what happens specifically. But farming does take on a new
Look,
chapter, a new
yeah,
look.
yeah,
It
exactly.
still continues because again, like we keep exploring here in the history of fresh produce, no matter what happens, where you go, what you do, plants are always going to be part of that story. They're not necessarily
100%.
the lead character or the lead role in that story, but they're there in the background playing a really big piece of the
It's
story.
always there.
And that's why I don't know how many, this gonna be third year now, maybe, of our show, and I think we're up to. I'm going to do some live research here. So by the end of the year, we'll have put out at least over 120 episodes,
Yeah, we're looking
and we
good.
still got more to go. So stay tuned for that because, like I said, we're just starting to organize our calendar for 2026. Like I said, I think we're gonna start off with uh, a banger of a series with Joseph Banks. Not sure how many episodes that's going to be, but it'll be a good amount. We have the World's Cup this year, coming up, right? This
Yep.
for those that enjoy soccer or football, for people outside the United States, they expanded the lineup this year to 48 teams, I believe.
It's gonna be fun.
So we're going to try something ambitious, and that is going to be, so if those of you have been listening for a while, we did a an Olympic series a
The
couple of
Olympic
years ago,
series was amazing. I
right?
love that series.
We're going to be ambitious. We're going to try to do another one with that for the World Cup. So we're going to try to find stories that incorporate each of those countries participating in the World Cup as it relates to produce history. So that's 48 teams, Patrick. That's 48 episodes. I think what we're going to end up doing is I think half of them will be available to regular HFP listeners. But if you want to get the full 48, the second 24, I think the plan is that's going to be available to HFP club members. So if you wanted an incentive to join the club, there it is.
There's
You want to
the
hear the full World Cup series. So that's going to be, we'll see how we do. I'm not going to make any promises yet, but that's our goal. We have a goal set to try to pump that out. So something exciting to look forward to, in addition to all the other episodes we'll be doing over the course of the year.
yeah, it'd be great.
So that's it from us today. We appreciate the support as always. And like I just said, if you want to hear more, looking for a holiday gift, because we are in the holiday season, HFP club membership makes for a great gift, right?
Yeah. And you'll get more episodes, more discounts on books, and more of John and I. So
Let's not
let's
to
go.
love. What's not to love? If you can't get enough of us, that is a gift made for whoever you love. Us more in the ears of the people you love. So anyway, until next time, it's goodbye for me, John Papp.
And goodbye for me, Patrick Kelly.